Okay. Just loading. Okay. All right. Peace, folks. How's it going? My name is Nico Rubio of Shuffle Life Productions, and welcome to the Real Talk Tap Talks podcast. Today, I'm really excited that on episode 18, we have someone that I'm just really excited to speak with. Um, if you are familiar with tap dancing or an enthusiast or someone from Chicago, you've maybe heard of the legacy of Tommy Sutton, who started the Mayfair Academy of the Fine Arts. And you may also know of our guest today, who not only is the daughter of Tommy Sutton, but has her own history or herstory, if you will, that she'll be sharing with us today. So give a warm round of applause at home for Mrs. Peggy Sutton. Welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Yes. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, real good.
Yeah. And you're checking in not from Chicago. You're actually elsewhere right now, right?
I am in Gilbert, Arizona, and
Nice.
that's about 35 minutes out of Phoenix.
Nice. Yeah. And that's a fresh move too, right?
Fresh move. I've been here since November of 2020.
Nice. Okay, great. Yeah. So we'll get to all of the modern day history,
Okay.
as we talk today. But as much as we can talk about Tommy Sutton and you being his daughter and all of that, I think it would be really cool to speak on your history in dance, which I know has to include him. But I think it would be great to start with how you got into dance. Is it something that just naturally happened with being in a dance home, or how did that come about for you?
Well, actually, as you said, of course, I grew up in a dance home,
Mm,
but dancing was never really my forte.
mm,
I took
mm,
dancing as a child all my life, of course, and I liked dancing, but I never considered myself, uh, quote unquote, as a dancer. I
mm,
was never really the student that was really into performance.
mm,
I
mhm,
liked dance, I liked class, but the performance side was really not for me.
mm.
So I was really more comfortable backstage and, just seeing how things worked as far as the music, everything that pertained to putting the show together.
Yeah.
So, like I said, as a child, that's what I did. I went to college. I majored in accounting just because I figured that would be good. If I ever needed a job, I could get a job in accounting.
Yeah.
And then I realized after getting that degree that that was not at all what I wanted to do. But I
Mm,
had no clue as to what I wanted to do, being, in my 20s and just kind of out there and trying to figure out life. And
right.
so my father decided um, in 1978 that he wanted to retire and move to Atlanta. So he asked me if I wanted to, first, he asked me if I wanted to move to Atlanta and open up a school. And I said no, I didn't want to leave Chicago. So he left Chicago, moved to Atlanta, and literally just handed me the keys and said, here, Mayfair is yours. I'm
Wow.
leaving. And this is what you're going to do, because I was struggling with what I wanted to do. I really had not a clue. So I felt like he really could see more than I could at that point,
Mm-hmm.
because I never felt like I was going to take over Mayfair or that that was going to be my life's mission.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that's just kind of how it happened.
Wow. Yeah, and that's become your life's work, and
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that's so interesting because sometimes people see us in a role that we've been in for so long that they think
Sure.
it would have always been that. But it's an interesting thing. I can imagine growing up in a family with someone who's as prestigious as a dancer and an educator as him. To do you want to do that, or do you want to go in your own direction?
Right.
Uh, but from my understanding, you not only did that once you took over, but going all the way back to the beginning, you danced with your father and your older sister, right?
I did. I did. We were called the Sutton Trio.
Yeah, 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 which is so interesting.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I said, I like dancing, but I just never found, I was a very shy child,
Mm,
extremely shy.
yeah.
So, you went on stage because that's what you were supposed to do and you were told to do, and I did that. But I did not, that just wasn't my thing.
Yeah.
Where some people get on stage and they just light up and they see the audience and the applause and it just feeds their soul. That
Right.
was not me at all.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah. Was it kind of the opposite or the same for your older sister?
Now it was quite the opposite for my sister. She was the performer. She was the one that when, it was lights, camera, action, she just lit up. And that was, really kind of fed her soul. Now, she didn't go into dancing professionally,
Mm.
but when we were younger, yeah, she was much more the dancer, I would say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So they kept you in some way somehow. Uh, I mean, I guess I'm curious because I should say, when I was going to start this podcast originally 2 years ago, um, I I had just talked to Brill Barrett, and he had mentioned that he did his Tap Legacy talks, and I never checked them out fully until recently, being that I interviewed Jimmy Payne, who he interviewed, and then getting ready for this, I wanted to, check and see. And so I hadn't heard until then of the Sutton Trio.
Okay.
And so many people are so curious about Tommy Sutton's history, beyond what we already know.
Hmm.
And so that's really cool to hear about. And so I'm still curious to like what kind of act did you have and what kind of places did you perform at?
Well, back then, and this is probably, let me think, like early 60s, maybe.
Mm,
So at the time, we danced just everywhere and anywhere. You
mm,
know, um, say church functions, a lot of charitable organizations. We did bigger shows like at venues like, which are no longer here, but like the Tivoli and,
mm,
just a lot of performances any and everywhere. Now, my father, of course, was the ultimate performer.
mm,
That's just who he was. He had a big personality. He loved to perform. He loved people. He loved, just really being on that stage. So just wherever we could, just about every weekend, we were dancing. And not always the three of us.
mm,
Sometimes it was with, my peers, like my dance class, or, at the time it wasn't really called a company, but it was like our company at that time.
yeah.
So, you'd have different groups of kids that would dance wherever, whenever, however.
Hmm.
I'm sure you've experienced this even now, like you go some places and they don't have a floor. So you had
Right.
to improvise. You had
Yeah.
to figure out like where you were going to dance, or, like maybe we'd be out in the park and he would have to find, at the time they didn't have dance like tap boards. So you would
Right.
just have to find some kind of piece of wood or a
Right.
door or something
Exactly.
that would make that sound that you needed. So,
Yeah.
I had great exposure through dance to all kinds of scenarios, situations, just a lot of opportunity to really be exposed to a lot.
Yeah, I can imagine, and just like you said, even now, it's similar sometimes. But in Mad Rhythms in those early days, we did all kinds of shows in a
Mhm.
similar way, all the local
Yeah.
things for friends, for family, for community, and also running into those same kind of scenarios with floors where it'd be a
Yes.
rug, or like you said, an
Yes.
outside thing, and there's
Right.
just not, it's not really set up like it should be, but it teaches us how to improvise and how to work around
Right.
things. And I can only imagine, if it's going from a trio to like a group, then that's
Yes.
more floor that you need,
Exactly.
as well.
Exactly. Because as being a dancer, a lot of organizations, they want dancers and they want groups to come out, but they don't have any idea of what's involved with that and
Mhm.
what's really necessary. So even in, talking to somebody prior, asking them about what type of floor, where is it, is it a slippery floor? Is it not? It just comes with its challenges sometimes.
For sure, for sure. So I want to ask, you mentioned that it would be not just the trio. Sometimes it would be, who the dancers, who you all were working with. But what kind of material did you do? Was it like everyone did the same routines, or when it was groups, there it was something different?
It was pretty much
But was
every,
it like an act?
well, it
I'm
could
sorry, I
be
was gonna
like,
say.
no, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say, was it like an act or like just choreography, like what the pieces were?
Pretty
If
much
you know what
just
I mean.
choreography, it's like a group dance. A lot of time it was just like a single line, everybody's doing the same thing at
Mm,
the same time, choreography. Um,
yeah.
Pretty much that's what it was. If it were, sometimes we would put on like small shows where there might be 4 or 5 groups, and maybe it wasn't all tap, it might be ballet and jazz included in there. So just small shows, depending on the size of the venue and what the whoever was organizing it, what they wanted.
Right, right. Yeah. Nice, nice. So I just want to, shout out to those who are checking us out live on YouTube. Thank you all for tuning in. Happy Sunday to those who are tuning in live. Uh, Jason Buckner, I don't know if you know that name. He says, "Hey." Nina Cooper says, "Hi, Miss Peggy."
Hi everybody.
So yeah, yes. Hello to everyone. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you. And feel free to subscribe and like and all of those things. But I'm not gonna do promotional talk too much today. I just wanted to get that out of the way. But I wanted to ask, back to your early dance history. Do you remember if you learned tap first or other styles, or were they together, or like what kind of training did you have outside of just tap dancing?
Well, when I started dancing when I was 5. So
Mm,
at that time, we had, I think, what was a combination class. So we had tap, we had ballet, and we had tumbling, just a little bit of each.
mm,
And then I think probably maybe about, I don't know, 7 or 8 is when we started, like all tap or all ballet or all jazz. So growing up, I took
yeah.
everything at least to a certain point, and tap was my main focus.
Mm,
Yeah, yeah.
hmm.
And my father was
Nice,
always
nice.
my teacher.
Mm, that's cool too. Yeah. So
Well,
he was like pretty
cool in
much
some
your teacher.
aspects. He was always my teacher.
Right. Yeah, I can imagine. Well, was it like 24/7? Like, wake up,
No,
it's
no,
shuffles for
no,
breakfast,
no,
or was
no,
it all at the studio?
no. It was all in the
Okay.
studio because he was pretty busy at that time when he first started Mayfair. He was also teaching, a lot of different places. So no, it was just at Mayfair that you know I had him as
Mm,
an instructor. But he now
yeah.
I never really thought about it too much, but I never had any other tap instructor other than him. Yeah.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine, uh, fun and, other things as well. But yeah, that's really great. And so, it's kind of hard to not just dive into speaking about him. Uh, but I guess we could start with before he started Mayfair, he wasn't just a teacher, he was a performer. And from my understanding, he performed with Duke Ellington and Count Basie and Cab Calloway. And so could you speak to a little of his early history? And also, like, is that something that you learned about when you were younger or older, or what was, that like for
Not
you?
really until I was a little older. He didn't really talk about it a lot. And at the time,
Yeah,
there weren't a lot of resources available like there are today, to be able to go like look him up
right.
or Google his name and see what he had done. So I
Hmm.
don't really know a lot about his early dance history. I do know that
Yeah,
coming up, he was just kind of on the street dancing. At the time they would call them hoofers, and he was a hoofer. And,
yeah,
he danced at a lot of clubs and, um, just a lot of different venues that were available at the time. One of his mentors, I do know, was Sadie Bruce. Are you familiar with the Bruce sisters?
yes,
Yeah. So I know that he
yeah,
did
yeah.
a lot with Sadie Bruce.
That's amazing. So, was he from here?
He's
From
actually
Chicago?
from Brookhaven, Mississippi. And then he came to Chicago. I'm not really
Mm,
sure of the age. I don't really remember now, but at a young age, maybe about 10 years old. And then he was in Chicago,
yeah,
from that point on.
yeah, yeah. So, in case you know, I'm curious, do you know if he danced before he moved here or after?
I don't know. I really don't know if he danced like as a young child. I'm really not sure about that.
Yeah, yeah, or like when he got started.
Yeah.
But that's cool that he worked with Sadie Bruce because she had a studio. I'm starting to figure out the history of not just dancers but studios and
Right. Right.
sacred
Right.
spaces for dance that we've had. And so last month was Black History Month, so we interviewed people like um, Ted Lewis Levy, who talked about Sammy Dyer, of
Sure.
course, and then we had someone like you know um, Jimmy Payne Jr., who of course talked
Okay.
about Jimmy Payne Sr.
Sure.
So
Okay.
we know of Sammy Dyer, we know of that history with Jimmy Payne, and but before that and Mayfair, I feel like Sadie Bruce maybe was first,
Yes.
if
Yes.
I'm getting things to
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
They were.
And she, some of these folks worked with her.
Oh, I'm sure.
So that's yeah, that's really interesting. And and so I'm just curious, if you could speak on his relationship with folks like Sammy Dyer or Jimmy Payne, because it's an interesting folkloric tale
Mm-hmm.
that there was
Mm-hmm.
some kind of competition or some kind of competitive vibe between them, but I've heard maybe the opposite of that as well. So if you don't mind sharing about that.
Okay. From what I know, and being a young child at the
Mm,
time, that there was no competition between them. I know that he was good friends with Sammy
yeah.
Dyer and with Jimmy Payne. And I think that they all danced together
Mm,
at some point. Now, Sammy Dyer was a little older, but I know they were
yeah.
friends. I remember as a very young child, maybe 6, 7, that we would always go to the Sammy Dyer shows because they put on these great shows. And I just
Mm,
remember being in the audience all the time. I didn't really meet Jimmy Payne until I was a little bit older, but I do know that they were all friends.
yeah.
Now, I would say
Wow.
maybe in the like 70s, maybe 80s, there was this
Mm,
supposed competition between Mayfair and Sammy Dyer, the schools. I never
mm,
felt that way.
right.
I don't know
Right,
if the
right.
students at Sammy Dyer felt that way. At the time, those were
Mm,
primarily your two dance studios for children of color. And so I just never
Yeah.
felt the competition, but I've heard that many, many times. So I don't know where that rumor came from.
Yeah. Right, right. Yeah, I think that it's something that happens with with dance, of course, but with tap dancers especially. Even just with two people when you're dancing together, people try to turn it into a challenge,
Yeah, yeah,
and
yeah,
it could be a whole other thing with a whole other intention. But that's really really cool to hear that they were friends.
they were.
Because it seems like they all had similar missions, in their own way and in their own right.
Right.
And the South Side is a huge place, in Chicago, period. So
Exactly.
it's not like there needed to be competition for students or anything like that.
No, and I think they
Um,
were in, like,
but
Sammy Dyer was more of a theater school, where, of course, tap was, prevalent,
mm,
but they were really focused on dramatics, and then they had an excellent acrobatic program at the time. So they did, their range was
mm,
a little bit broader, I think, as far as theater. Mayfair at the
yeah,
time was very concentrated on tap. I'm not really sure about Jimmy Payne and his school. I don't know that much about it, but I think they were
right,
diverse enough that they could all coexist together.
right, right. Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. And sometimes, we just wish that they had camera phones back then,
I
so there was more
know,
video
I
documentation.
know.
you know,
Yes, that would be
um,
nice.
yeah. But speaking to intention, so from my understanding, he had his own career and as a performer and then as a teacher, and he was teaching around Chicago, and from my understanding, the country, and even up to places like Canada. I
Yes.
hear of him going up there. But if you could tell the people, what was it that inspired him to open a dance studio?
Well, actually, he had a couple of dance studios before Mayfair. He had partnered with a
Mm,
few other people. I'm not sure of the names at this point, um, but just small schools. But primarily, either the schools were downtown or in Hyde Park. And at this point, this was probably like in the late 40s, early 50s. Um, they were not designed for people of color. So even if I go back into like
mm-hmm.
our early archives and pictures that I have of him, like teaching at,
Yeah,
workshops and dance conferences and conventions, there might have been, say, 100
yeah.
dance teachers, and he was the only person of color there. So I think that,
Mm,
he realized when he had his own children, myself and my sister, um, that he wanted someplace for us to be able to dance as well as the other children
right.
in his community. So that's why he really started Mayfair.
Yeah. Yeah, I had heard of a partnership with another dance studio, or
Mhm.
something like that. So that's cool that, he had that experience to inspire him for, what the South Side communities needed. But also for him to learn, I'm imagining, some things before he started a studio of his own.
Right,
So
right.
so that's really cool. And so it started in 1957, right?
Yes.
The studio. He's
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And so for those who don't know, I don't think I ever took classes at Mayfair, but I have rehearsed there, and actually when I joined Mad Rhythms, we used to have these summer boot camps that were
Yes, I
at Mayfair,
remember that.
like for a week long.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, for that was my introduction to the Mayfair on 79th,
right.
and I fell in love with the space right away because, for those who are familiar with the movie Tap, it was in a studio where there was, two floors, and then the upstairs was like the Hoofer's house,
Right.
or just like for the Hoofers. And when I went in this space, it just you go to different dance studios that of course feel like home
Mhm.
when you walk
Sure.
in, but it felt like an actual home, and where there were like stairs that led up, and it was clear like
Okay.
you don't go up there, but it just had me in my head feeling like I wonder if there are a bunch of old tap dancers up there playing cards and challenging each other or something.
That wasn't really
Just being
happening, but
young as I right. But that's just where my mind
sure.
went, and but either way, like the space was amazing, and I had such a history of my own in there, but I learned more history of the studio um, years later, and even now, and that actually wasn't the first location, from my understanding, right?
Right. The first
Like
location
79th
was,
was actually there.
yeah, there was the first
Mm,
location was on 79th and King Drive. And when we actually opened, it was called
mm,
South Park. So we were there for a few
yeah.
years. Then we moved to 76 in Cottage Grove. We were there for a few years. Then we were actually at a church. This was like a temporary studio for about a year or
Mm.
so until we moved into the building on 79th Street. And we were there like 45 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so crazy. I thought there was maybe just one. So, you had a few different spaces before
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah.
And what were those
Yeah.
like? Because you said one was temporary, but like, were they all kind of where you had multiple studios, or was it like one
Well,
main
the
studio?
first studio we had, like one large studio space, and then maybe a very small studio, like for just private lessons or something. And then,
Yeah.
it's just a storefront. And then when we moved to 76 and Cottage, that
Mm,
was a wonderful studio. There was like a really large room with a sound partition. So you can make it into two studios.
yeah.
And then I think there was a smaller studio.
Mm,
When we went to the church, like I said, it was just temporary until we moved into 79th Street. So,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. So I grew up at the dance
Wow. Wow.
studio.
Yeah, yeah, wow. At a few, it sounds like. And I just think this is really interesting, even for folks who are tuning in. Someone said Mayfair 79th was home. So I imagine even for folks who may have been there for their whole dance career, they may or may not know of the studios before that.
Right.
I know I didn't, so that's really cool to hear of. But you said that you started with a couple dance styles and then expanded on. So did the did you add different styles as you were going to different locations, or what was that like? Because I feel like I've heard of the tap ballet, but also Afro Cuban and ballroom. I feel like I've heard
Yes,
of
we did.
those
I think
styles
we
as
had
well.
that when he opened early on. I think it just kind of depended, dance kind of goes in waves and trends. And I think it did so even at that
Right,
time.
right.
So I think Afro Cuban was really
Mm,
big. So, we had a lot of Afro Cuban
yeah.
classes, kind of bringing in ballroom. Even, we had
Mm,
classes for like popular dance. And this really ages me, but like the
mm.
twist, they used to have classes to
Oh
teach you
wow.
how to do the twist or the Madison, which was maybe like the first line dance. And then just as
Mm,
trends and dance changed, we kind of incorporated that
yeah.
into our classes, like more like maybe modern or contemporary or whatever it was at the time.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. That's really cool to hear. And so that covers the styles, and you had already mentioned that with the Sutton trio, you would sometimes have people from the studio joining you all for
Sure,
performances and such. And and
sure.
and so I've heard that the name changed from the Mayfair Academy of the Fine Arts to the Mayfair Performing Company.
Yes,
And
yes.
so Was that something that
Yes.
happened a lot later, or
Yes, a
when did the
lot
name
later.
change happen?
It really came,
Okay.
I would say, we probably incorporated the Mayfair Performing Company maybe about 10 years ago. And that's when we
Okay, yeah.
changed to a nonprofit status. And so the Mayfair Performing Company is
Mm,
a nonprofit entity as opposed to Mayfair Academy.
got
So
it.
that's where the name change came. So
Yeah, I see. So when you all would perform, people from the studio, that was a thing, right? Like back when, and did you is that was a thing, right? That there
performing,
were performances. What
yes.
name would you
We would use like the Mayfair
what
Dancers or the Mayfair Junior Dancers or the Mayfair Ensemble,
mm,
whatever he felt like at the time.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because from my understanding, it wasn't that you just did recitals. It was just like you said, you started with the Sutton Trio performing in many different kinds of,
Right,
situations on a local
right.
level.
So
Yeah,
we
and
actually had
and you
we actually had a performing company. It just wasn't called a company. Was it was just a group of
right,
students,
right, yeah,
and you would just put together whatever show was needed at the time, and you would just go out, and dance.
nice, nice, yeah, and so you all just like Sammy Dyer and other studios that we hear of in Chicago didn't just do a regular recital at a high school or gymnasium or something like that. Like you actually sought after some pretty prestigious venues, from my
Well,
understanding, right?
early on, we did most of our shows at high schools. And I think Sammy Dyer did too a
Mm,
lot. When we first started out, a lot of our shows were at Dunbar High School, which is on about
mm,
31st, maybe like 29th and King Drive. And at the time, it was a new
mm,
high school and it was really nice, and they had a great theater and stage. And so a lot of our shows were there, Mayfair as well as Sammy Dyer.
yeah.
And at the time, you have to remember this is, like in the early 60s, a lot of venues were not available
Mm,
to blacks, schools and
mm,
companies. So then as things progressed, when I took over, well, actually, even when my father was there, we did different venues. We used to have dinner and lunch shows at the Conrad Hilton, which was a big change from your
mm,
regular recital venue. And we would have dinner and then
right.
the show. So we went to different venues, but then I think more when I took over, I really wanted to expose our students to all of the venues that Chicago had to offer. And that was from like Medina
Mm,
Temple to the Chicago Theater, to Airy
mm,
Crown, Harris Theater. I wanted them to know that, they could dance there just like anybody else could dance there.
right, right. Wow. And yeah, hearing of these venues is amazing, like Diamond Temple and places like that, because we know of the
Medina Temple.
Airy Crown, but oh,
Medina
Medina
Temple.
Temple.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
That's for, that's way old
Yeah, thank
school.
you. Yeah, yeah, and like the Skyline stage too. I've heard of that one,
Yes,
right?
yes, yes,
Was that a
yes.
place too?
That was a great venue.
Mm,
But it took a little doing to get into that
yeah.
venue. At first, they wouldn't rent it to us. And it took a little,
Mm,
persistence, I would say, to be able to
yeah.
have our show there.
Wow, wow. I mean, that's great that, you all had that persistence though, because in a time, where I imagine the station and then just people, being as it was in the time, it might not have been so simple. I can imagine. So is that something that your father had to experience, or was it more of you when you took over?
I'm sure he had to
I mean,
experience some of
obviously.
it. but he was definitely
Yeah.
that type of person that was going to persist and make sure that he got what he was entitled to, what we all deserved. So I think he instilled that in me also, that, if this person can be there, we can be there too. And so I never had any
Yeah.
reservation in trying to do something. Sometimes it just took a little bit longer
Yeah.
to get it done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's great. I mean, it's such an amazing history. And again, I'm so thankful that we could talk about it. Uh, I I kind of want to ask you about a name that I'm not sure where this fits in, but I know people light up when they hear this name of a Chicago dancer named Bobby Ephraim.
Yes.
So
Yes.
yeah,
Bobby
yeah. So
Ephraim.
what was his connection to everything?
I'm not really sure. I just know that he and my father were friends. And I remember,
Mm,
I don't even know, I might have been in my, I don't even know, maybe my early 20s or something when I was first introduced to Bobby Ephraim. And it was just the most
mm,
amazing thing because, he could just tap forever without stopping, like
mm,
nonstop
mm.
and fast. And I had never seen anything like that. And it was just amazing. I don't really know anything about the history of Bobby Ephraim, like really where he came from. It
Yeah.
just, at one point, he was just there and he was just amazing. Amazing. I don't know. Do you know if there's any
Wow.
video on Bobby Ephraim?
I haven't found anything yet. That's one of those names I've heard when I was younger,
Okay.
and now that I'm, really serious about learning our history and collecting our history,
Hmm.
it's a
Yeah.
name that keeps popping up.
Yes,
So,
yes,
I'm
yes.
just curious to ask folks. That's cool that they were friends. Like, did him or did other people ever like feature in your recitals or in your shows, or was it mainly
When you
just
brought
main
up his
characters?
name, I was just trying to think. I know that he did some things like with my father, for my father, but I can't remember exactly what they were.
Yeah.
And I was just trying to go over that in my mind to think maybe I might even have some video of him from a long time ago. I'm not even sure. So we'll see.
Wow.
That's another thing.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
another project that's to come.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we have to stay connected. I owe you a shirt, and if
Yes,
you
yes.
share any footage, that would be amazing. You also mentioned that there might be footage of your father dancing or something like that.
Not
Um,
old footage, not from a long time ago. Well, I mean, now it would be
yeah,
a long time ago, but not like when he was a younger dancer. I do have a lot of footage. Um, I have so much content. I have 63 years worth of content. And so my goal in the next year is to,
mm,
I've got it pretty much organized, but I have to digitize everything and, try to put it together in a website or kind of a sort of like a Mayfair digital museum is really what I'm trying to put together.
yeah,
So
amazing.
it's just like I said, I pretty much have the materials organized. I just have to figure out how to do it. With
Yeah,
technology and getting everything actually scanned. I have a lot of VHS tapes and just a lot of content. So that's what I am working on for the next year. Hopefully, I can have that together.
oh, that's amazing. Yeah, if you'd like any consultation, any help, I
I
could
will.
definitely
I
talk with
will.
you on that. I have been doing that myself. Over
Okay.
here, I have so many tapes myself that I've been
Yes.
going through, and it's so crazy. I'm so thankful that I came in a generation where we got to experience cassette tapes and VHS
Okay.
tapes and
Okay.
all of the
Okay.
analog
Okay.
stuff before it went digital. But I'm just myself now, actually digitizing all of these things. So,
Okay.
you know,
Okay.
um,
Yes, we'll talk.
yeah, 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 for sure, for sure. It's something that, you know, so many of us tap dancers who experienced, not just documenting our own, you know, experiences, but trading old clips. That was a big thing, and
Okay.
we've been talking about for a long time. We all need to digitize our stuff, and I was like, okay,
Yeah.
well, in the past year we were in this pandemic. You know, it's perfect time to get to it, and I just got to it, you know, a couple months ago or so, though, to
Okay.
be honest.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, that's great to hear that you have some things, because it would be great to, you know, have some visual representation of him, even if, you know, it was when he was
Yes.
older.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
So I do have some.
yeah,
I
because
just have
even
to, kind of get it together. And then also, I'm fortunate enough, I do have a recording of myself and a group that I was in, when I was younger, the Mayfair Junior Dancers, whatever we were called. This was an
mm,
old show that you would definitely not be familiar with. It was called the Ted Mack Amateur Hour, and it was kind of like a star
mm,
search in the early 1960s, maybe even the late 50s.
wow,
And I was fortunate enough
yeah,
to get a copy of that performance. And it was like, well, I don't remember the foundation that I went through, but they were able to get me a copy of the performance. So I am, fortunate to have that, a copy of me dancing when I was about 10 or 11 years old. So,
wow, wow, that's amazing. I just looked it up on the side,
oh, Ted
and
Mack.
yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, yep, yeah. It's so funny while I'm doing all of this, because I'm doing these podcasts for not just me to learn, but other folks. But I'm taking notes and looking things
Okay.
up on the side, you because that's just so interesting. All these shows and all of these things, but yeah, so we'll follow up, and you know,
Okay.
maybe you know, once you have that, we'll make sure that we share, you know, your
Okay.
archive with people,
Definitely.
because folks have definitely been interested, you know,
Okay.
and when people heard that I was going to be interviewing you today, people, you know, had plenty of questions and things that I was already planning to ask. And
Okay.
um, not to put you on the spot and say, but for most of my interviews with folks, these are just part one. You know, if we do
Okay.
something again, because we could be here, I'm sure, all day
Okay.
long talking about things, you know, but we'll keep it somewhat concise for today. Um, but I think it would be interesting for you to share that, you know, what the what Tommy Sutton's I don't, I'm sorry that I don't know the words for what to call it, but his exercises and his
That's what
book
they were
and
called,
all of that,
exercises.
like, yeah, yeah. I, f- you know, from being close with Martin Trey Dumas the third, who's a student of
Mm-hmm.
Mayfair, he's shared some of this stuff with me
Mm-hmm.
before, and being at his house, I've seen the book before. But
Okay.
um, if you could share with
Okay.
people, you know, what that was about, and how he developed that, because it was also my understanding that he kind of did that in retirement time, or at least when he moved out of Chicago, it was like at that point, I believe.
Well, he had really been working on his tap system, I would call it, for years. Like when I was younger, that's what
Mm,
we learned our exercises. So I think probably early
mm,
on, maybe even before he started the studio and he was dancing at different places, I think he wanted some type of system to kind of connect the tap dancers, where it was a little bit more precise in what they were doing. So he developed this tap system,
right.
and it's, I think, I'm not even sure, maybe like 10 exercises. And so, it's like just the basics of tap, and then moving up like towards intermediate
Mm,
tap, and then more towards advanced tap. And he did a lot of
yeah.
teaching to tap teachers, and especially to teachers that maybe were
Yes.
not really tap dancers, but maybe they had their own studio and they wanted to teach tap. So, he did a lot of conventions and workshops. So then when he moved, when he
Yes.
retired and moved to Atlanta, that's when he put it all in a book. And it's called Tap Along with Tommy. And that's another thing on my agenda. I
Mm,
have these books that I've had for years that I've never really, um, um, put it out there. I sell a few here and there, but I really want to
yeah.
do that this year, is to revise that, because it's an excellent system. And it's like, the basics of anything, like knowing your ABCs before you can spell, or, you know, knowing your multiplication tables, that kind of thing. So it's like really knowing the basics of tap and breaking it down.
Mm, yeah, and it was based off of 12 basic steps, right?
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Wow, wow. Yeah, so like I've learned a little bit from Trey before, but I'm excited for when you put that out because that would
Okay.
be really really cool to have, and it's an important distinction that he created this for teachers to help them with
Right.
teaching, right? It wasn't necessarily just for students.
No, it was really for
Yeah.
teachers. It was a guide. I think it's called a guide to tap teachers or something like that. I don't have the book in. Well, actually, I do have the book. I'm gonna get it real quick.
Oh, oh, watch out. Nice. Yes.
So it is Tap Along with Tommy, and it is the Tommy
Wow.
Sutton method of tap instruction. But it's really a guide,
Mm.
for tap instructors.
Yeah, it looks like a thick volume, right? So there's like
It's three
multiple books within
volumes.
that.
It's three volumes. Let
Mm.
me see if I can. So
Wow.
it is, yeah, three volumes. And then one, I think, is a history of tap, like a vocabulary. And then there are some,
Yeah.
actual um, routines that he's done in here. And it's really a great
Wow.
tap guide for tap dancers. And this was at a time, which
Yeah.
they don't do this anymore because everything is on video. But before everything was on video, you had to
Right.
write out everything. So you did dance notes,
Mm.
like when you went to conventions and things
Right.
like that, so that you could share it with
Yeah.
others. Where now you just do a video and you just see what's happening. But this is when people did
Mm.
actual, they wrote everything down. So yeah.
Right. Wow. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you couldn't type it on your phone or your tablet or something like that. You had
Right.
to actually,
Right.
write it out.
Yep, yep, yep,
Yeah,
yep, yep.
wow. So somebody in the chat asked a really good question. What is Could you say what is your favorite exercise or tap steps from this book, from his
Probably
book?
my I have two. Well, there's one and two are kind of together. And I think that's
Yeah.
probably my favorite, just because those are the essentials. Your singles, your flaps, your doubles, your flap heels. That is the basis.
Yeah.
Then exercise number three I like is because it's all about heels, flap heel heels and flap heels and brushbacks, and it goes in a little bit deeper. So I think one and two, though, is probably, for me, my favorite. Now, for years, many years, I taught tap for maybe about 30 years. So you learn how
Yeah.
to really break it down to teach it to students, and the exercise one and two is just perfect for that. So anybody who's interested
Yeah.
in learning how to break it down, for younger students especially, oh, well, for older students too, I guess, but
Hmm.
it's just right there for you. It's here it is. This is how you teach them, and then from that foundation, then you can move on to do whatever you want to do.
Right. Right. Wow. That's great. I'm curious because I'm trying to remember if I've seen these exercises with or without music. Was there music accompanying music, or was it a cappella for
There
these
was music. Yeah,
exercises?
there was definitely music. He would play music. These are older songs that I probably have somewhere. He also did a
Mm.
corresponding cassette tape that went along with Tom,
Mm.
which I have also somewhere. And then you could, of course, do it
Wow.
a cappella. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And so for you, when you took this material and was sharing it, did you ever switch up the music or like play modern music or
Oh,
anything like that, or
yes.
you kept it
Oh,
kind of
yes.
traditional?
Yes. Yes. Because I mean, this was definitely the foundation of Mayfair. So we have done this for the last,
Mm.
50 something years. So of course you have to change with the times.
Wow.
And actually, we just did something maybe about a year ago with some of our alumni who come back, and they can all get
Yeah.
together and still know exercise one, exercise two, exercise number three. Sort of like if you were to put tap dancers together and they were doing the shim sham, or, something like that. And then, of course, you have to update the
Yeah.
music. So we were just trying to figure out, some updated music that we could use. I don't remember which songs they were, but, maybe some Beyonce,
Mhm.
maybe some Bruno Mars.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's amazing. Yeah, I can imagine as you go from genres, from jazz, you might go to more pop or house music, even, or something
Yes,
like that.
yes, yes, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wow, wow. Um, so speaking of students and alumni, uh, I know this might be a difficult question because people sometimes in studios worry about favorites or things like that. So I know you can't mention every student you've ever had, but are there any particular students that you've had over the years that you feel proud of, or who maybe went on to continue dancing or something like that, or even just from Mayfair? You know.
Well, quite a few. Of course, there's Trey Dumas, who started, with Mad
Yeah.
Rhythms. Erin Barnett, she's, was the artistic director at Mayfair for the last few years, and she was, toured with the Lion King. We've had several students throughout the years that have, danced professionally. And, but what I'm even as
Yeah.
proud of is just not those students that maybe went on to dance professionally, but just the students that were there that just turned out to be really great people. And, maybe Mayfair
Mm.
contributed a little to that, maybe from structure, from discipline, whatever. So we just have a lot of great alumni. And then, of course, we have our most famous alumni, and that is our former First Lady, Michelle Obama. So we throw that name out a lot. But she
Mm.
danced at Mayfair,
Yes.
and she mentioned that in her
Wow.
book, Becoming. So we're very proud of that.
Mm. That's so beautiful. That's amazing. I mean, there have been celebrities in Mayfair space, from my understanding. Like,
Yes.
um, I'm imagining maybe know, I don't know, of Common the rapper,
Oh, yes.
the rapper from Chicago. I
Yes.
was told that he took piano lessons
He
at
did.
Mayfair.
He did. Oh, you've really done your homework, huh?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, this
Very
is
good.
something that Trey told me back in the day.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I was just like, what? Like Common was in here
Well,
taking piano
I'll
lessons,
tell you
because
a little story about that. I went into the studio one day,
mm,
and I was behind the desk, and some of the girls came in for class, and he had come in, I guess, before them, and I didn't know who he was. And he
mm,
went upstairs because that's when music classes were upstairs. And so they came back downstairs, and they were hysterical. They kept saying, Miss Peggy, do you know who's upstairs? And I'm like, who's upstairs? And at the time, his name was Common Sense. And they were like, it's common sense. It's common
right,
sense. And I'm like, okay, fine. And then, of course, a little later, I
right,
found
right.
out who he was. Yes. So, yes, I do remember Common from Mayfair.
Yeah, wow, that's amazing. I mean, because I believe he was from Chatham, off of 79th,
Hmm.
and when you ride up the from the expressway and you take 79th to the 79th location, there's a dry cleaners you pass that has the word Pride, up, and
Yes,
in one
yes,
of his albums in the book, yeah, in one of his albums in the booklet, like there was a picture of that, and
okay.
it was just it was interesting to think about that once I heard that driving,
Hmm.
past, his neighborhood on the way to there, and that's cool that it was so close
Right,
for him, you
right,
know.
right.
Yeah, because I've only been upstairs maybe two times or something like that. Or no, no, no. Actually, there's a studio up there,
There's a
right?
small studio up there. Yeah.
There's
And we used to use it
yeah,
at first, we
yeah.
used to
Actually,
just use it for like our baby classes. But then we put in a wood floor
mhm,
that I think Trey probably tore
yeah.
up with his tap shoes.
Yes, yes.
But
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's why I'm like, actually, yeah. I'm like, yeah.
yeah, so there were
No,
music
because
studios
I
upstairs.
myself actually, yeah, yeah. I myself actually was up there. I'm sorry, probably tearing up the floor with
So,
him,
so,
because I I remember we were mainly in the back studio on the first floor, and then
right, right,
sometimes we be next door depending on what was going on if you all had rehearsals or something. And
right.
then at one point I remember there was a season where we were upstairs, and
Okay.
it was a really nice space, especially like for having the light in, and we would rehearse on
Yes,
Sundays.
yes,
So
yes, yes.
just to say, like, Mayfair is my church for
Mm-hmm.
a very long time. The way that me and
Okay.
Trey look at how we rehearse on Sundays, it would often be Sunday mornings or early
Okay.
afternoon, and so it felt like a really sacred space before we went upstairs. But I remember once we went up there and the sun would shine in, it was just a really
Yes,
cool vibe,
it was.
and then so I asked Trey because I didn't want to be, looking around. I just wanted to stay to where I was supposed to be. But I asked him one day, what are those rooms over there? And he took me over, and I think that's maybe when he told me about Common taking private lessons in
Okay.
there. But there were
Yes.
like two or three piano rooms. I
Yeah.
feel like,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So if you don't mind sharing, like, obviously there were piano lessons and things like that, but was there anything else in Mayfair other than dance and piano lessons that happened?
No, not really. At different times, maybe we might try some drama classes or, some type of specialty class, but pretty much it was just the dance and the music.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Wow. Yeah. And one more thing I'm curious about from the 79th space, because it was such a distinguishing piece of it, but on the outside there was some really cool graffiti art that kind
Yes,
of wrapped around, the
yes,
building.
yes,
And also there was like on the inside by the grass by the entrance there was also a
yes,
mural right there of
exactly.
Tommy Sutton as well. So do you remember when that happened, and like was he still alive when that happened, or was that after he passed?
Um, I don't know. I don't think so. I'm trying to figure out the timing.
Mm,
I would think it was
yeah,
probably hmm, somewhere in the 90s, maybe the mid 90s to early 90s.
yeah.
One of our instructors, Maria Lanier, her husband at the time was
Mm,
a graffiti artist. And so he did some of that. He did the
mm.
outside of the building. And then I think somebody else did that inner part with my dad on there. Yeah, I think it was sometime in
Wow,
the 90s.
wow. Yeah, that makes sense. That's super, super cool. I mean, it again, like I said, it was just such a distinguishing part of the building, and
Yeah.
you know, not to speak all sad and everything, but it was very sad when you all moved. But I'm just so thankful that there's at least something there now. I believe it's a church,
It's a church.
and
Yes. Yes.
they did paint over it.
Yes.
They did paint
Yes.
over it, but of course, like,
Right.
it would be, I guess,
Right.
strange for it to say Mayfair for
Right.
a
Right.
church, but but I just remember being, sad when you all moved, because there's so many spaces that have been torn down, but at least it just being up still is really cool. And
I
depending on
really
where
did
I'm at,
not.
going from
Yeah, I really did not want to leave that location because we all love the
yeah,
studio. I really just wanted to um, remodel it. Maybe make it a little bit bigger and do some things. But just the area just
yeah,
was getting, it just was going down. The violence was
yeah,
getting more intense. And so, with our
mm,
parents coming in, of course, we had classes, during the week after school. You have a lot of women, mothers coming with their kids. So it just got to the
yeah,
point where it was time to go. I came to the studio one time and I was just kind of, being nostalgic because at that point I knew that we were going to move. But I went in the building, and then when I came
yeah.
out, like down the street, there was all this yellow police tape, and I don't know what was going on. And so it
Mm.
just confirmed to me that it was time to go.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Which is sad, but that makes sense because I've definitely been there or even driven past before when it's like
Mhm.
peak hours, and you had a nice parking lot, which is really
Yes,
cool.
yes,
But you could
yes,
still only fit so many cars, even if it is
exactly.
a big parking lot. So people would have to
Right.
like park around and
Yeah.
walk around. Yeah.
Mhm.
So where did you move to? Where was the last space?
We moved to 87th and Bennett, 8701 South Bennett, which was really only about 10 minutes from 79th, wasn't that far. But
Mm,
at the time, we felt that that was just a better location.
right. Yeah. And what was that like? Because for someone like me, like I said, or maybe I didn't say, I stopped rehearsing after you moved from 79 to
Okay.
87. So yeah, what was that space like? Was it bigger, or I feel like I heard it was maybe like in an old elementary school or something
It
like that.
was. It was a small school, and we just converted it to a dance
Mm,
space. So it actually worked out rather well. There was a large studio on the first floor, just one. And then
mm,
there were two smaller studios upstairs. But there were a lot of smaller rooms that we
yeah,
used for like conference room, um, costume room, dressing rooms. And then we still had the same music classes that we had at 79th Street. They went with us to
yeah.
87th Street. So they had a couple of rooms upstairs for music classes. So it was a good
Mm,
space.
nice.
It was a good space.
Yeah, yeah. And uh it's unfortunate that in the past year, so many things have changed, not just in Chicago, but in the world.
Hmm.
So um if you don't mind sharing, how did that affect Mayfair
Well,
and
what
COVID
happened
and everything
was,
this past year?
when everything shut down, when the world shut down, was in March of
Yeah.
2020. And at the time, like everybody else, we thought we were going to be closed for 2 weeks and then we would go back. But of
Mm,
course, that's not what happened.
right.
And then it also fell right at the time. We are a big recital school. So our shows are big and, we're
Mm,
really into that. So we were just,
yeah.
we had been preparing for the show and we were just kind of getting ready to move forward with everything as far as, pictures and tickets and just everything. And that's when we shut down. So it
Yeah.
really affected our bottom line tremendously because we lost a lot of
Mm,
income, as did most people.
yeah.
And then it was at the point where we just didn't know when we were going to be able to go back, just like everybody else. You just didn't know from
Mm,
day to day. So after that, maybe in April, all of our classes went online. So that worked for a little while, but
mm,
then, I think people just got tired of being online. We did a little something in the
right.
summer, And then we came back in September, but even in September, you know, the kids were not really back in school. So we had some students, but our student, you know, enrollment was way down. We were still trying to do virtual classes,
Yeah.
but you know, it just wasn't quite the same. And then in November, when we had our kind of phase two again of COVID, we went back to online
Mm-hmm.
classes. And at that point, I just realized that financially, we just could not, you know, we just couldn't continue. You know, we did get some assistance, but it wasn't enough to just really
Mm.
keep us going, especially with the building, because it was a large building. So, you know, at that
Yeah.
point,
Maintenance
just
and
made the decision to close at that point. So that's what
yeah,
happened. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. I mean, unfortunately, these things happen, but uh, that it's such a pristine legacy, and it's great that you had it last this long
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
some
63
people,
years
especially with how
is a
you
good
said.
run.
Yeah, it's an amazing run. That's an
Yeah.
amazing run. And, for some people, especially like if it was something like, doesn't sound like it was something that you were seeking or necessarily, trying to avoid. It just kind of happened. So, you could have just, took over for a few years and said, all right, I'm done. I'm going to do something else.
Exactly. Exactly.
So the fact that you stuck out,
Exactly.
and that was your life's work is amazing. And it's great to hear because I didn't even, think of bringing that up or know that that's what you were doing. But the fact that you're archiving and everything, I think
Yes.
is
Yes.
super important, and
Yes.
that's going to be
Yes.
really good for the legacy and the history because like I said, when I told a few of my close tap friends and my
Mm-hmm.
mentor, one of my mentors and such, they were really excited and they had all these questions because we've known a little of Tommy Sutton and Mayfair's history, but it's something that people are really, not just in Chicago but like around the country, in the world, I'm sure as well, are interested in learning more about. So I think that as unfortunate as the past year has been, and for anyone who might be tuning in outside of March 2021, this is a year later right now
Right.
that we're speaking of the past year with when COVID came in and this whole pandemic and everything. So it's been a lot of sad things and a lot of closings and of course people passing and that too. But on the other end, there are some good things that are coming from it, and a lot of people are starting to archive and digitize collections of photos and videos, and I think in that way it's good because whether you're a performing artist or a teacher or a director of a studio, we're constantly going from one thing to the next. Like
Sure.
it's a life that even when
Sure.
you have a slow season, it never really just stops, unless you have a dip. But the way that we all collectively had a dip, it's usually when somebody's up, somebody else is down, and vice
Okay.
versa. But we all kind of had a halt. So I think that it's good that in that time, so many people are documenting things that will be good for folks to know about. So
Yeah. Yeah.
really excited about all of that. Yeah,
Yeah. I really want to
yeah,
keep
and
the,
so
oh, I was going to say, I really want to keep the legacy of Mayfair alive, you know. So stay tuned.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And there's so many more questions that I could ask, but we're going to keep today's episode a little shorter than some. And we'll maybe have a follow up at some point.
Okay.
But we do have one quick segment that we do at the end of our shows. So I call it the Tap Nerd segment, where I
Okay.
ask tap questions and yeah, we'll dive into that before we're out. Right.
Okay.
So to kind of better get to know you and
Hmm.
such. So uh, who would you say are a few of your favorite tap dancers of all time?
Tommy Sutton, and
Yes.
probably the Nicholas brothers, the Nicholas
Yeah.
brothers, the that's yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, yeah. It was actually, it would have been Harold Nicholas's 100th birthday yesterday.
Wow, wow.
So it was just Harold Nicholas for the, yeah, his birthday. Yeah. Um, and this is always an interesting question. What
Mhm.
tap shoes uh, did you like the most, or did you use?
My tap shoes, I used Leo's. It was a Leo's brand,
Mm,
and they were the black and white
yeah.
Oxfords. You know,
Mm-hmm.
soft, kind of soft, the
Nice.
soft
Yeah. The
leather.
stand.
I don't know the name of the shoe, but that was my tap shoe.
Yeah, yeah. You never got into dancing in heels and all of that.
Well, we did use heels when I was younger. We danced in heels all the time,
Mm,
and then as things progressed,
yeah.
then you went to the more Oxford style. The lace up tap shoe,
Yeah.
the softer leather. So when I taught, like
Mm,
the last few years that I taught with those Leo tap shoes. I don't know what they're called.
yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course, for comfortability and such,
Yes.
I
And then
imagine.
also
Uh,
remember that I am not the performer. So I'm not trying to get a
mm-hmm.
2-inch sole and do all kinds of toe
Right,
stands.
right. Yeah,
Okay.
all kinds of crazy custom. Yeah, yeah. Exactly, exactly. No, that's great. Um, and so, you being very much a teacher, as you said, I'm curious, what is a musical artist, or if you want to share more than one, that you find that you played a lot over the years, if anyone stuck out in particular?
Hmm. I'm sure there are. I'm just trying to think of who. I think I tried to be diverse in my music. Um,
Yeah.
hmm. I probably did Stevie Wonder a lot. Um,
Yeah.
Maybe even James Brown. I like kind of a fast, upbeat kind of song.
Yeah, yeah.
I just can't. I think my
No,
tastes
those
are
are pretty
very
solid. I
varied.
didn't give you a disclaimer. Yeah, yeah, no, that's great. I didn't give a disclaimer like I normally do, that these questions are kind of difficult and kind of, put you on the spot kind of
I have to go
questions.
back and really think
But
about it.
no, that's right, right. No, that's great though. Those are solid, from Stevie Wonder to James Brown, and I understand. Something a little more upbeat. Is good
Yeah,
for tap. Um,
yeah.
so another question that might be difficult: do you have a favorite clip of tap, like a favorite piece of footage that you've really enjoyed? Um, if anything comes to mind.
Of course, the famous Nicholas Brothers clip on the stairs. I love that. I like a lot of
Yeah.
old Savion clips. I can't think of one in
Mm,
particular at this moment, but my style of tap is probably more old school and I don't want to get into
mm,
the specifics of this, but I'm not really the rhythm
yeah.
tapper. So,
Mm,
like I
mm-hmm.
said, I like kind of early Savion. So,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
probably,
Yeah. No, oh, I see what you mean. Like Tap Dance Kid, and like, when he was doing more
yes,
Broadway stuff.
yes, 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 yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes.
Yeah.
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 Gregory
And
Hines,
the
of course, I
Sesame
love
Street
Gregory
era.
Hines. Yeah. So there,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Nice, nice. We have just two more questions.
Okay.
So I normally ask this question kind of broadly, but I'm going to ask this more specifically. Um, is there anything that your father, that Tommy Sutton, taught you that really stuck with you, more like a piece of advice or something, rather than like steps and exercises?
I think one of the main lessons that I got from him is to to just go for it. If there's something that you want to do, to just do it and to go big, just reach for the
Yeah.
stars. And if that's what you want to do, it's yours for the taking.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. Um, and so our last question, I ask everyone this question as the last one. Uh, how would you like for people to remember you, or what would you like for them to remember about you as a dancer or a person or, director or any of that?
I think what I'd like them to remember, two things. Number one,
Mm,
that I provided them exposure. I provided my students exposure and opportunities, so that from the
mm,
very beginning student to the most advanced student, that they were all treated alike and that they all had the same opportunity. Like I said, I like the big venues and that I gave them exposure to those venues. And then the last thing I want all my students to remember me by is that the show always starts on time, regardless.
mm,
That's very important to me.
that's
Very
great.
important.
Yeah, I could use that advice myself. So I appreciate that reminder. I say, unfortunately, sometimes as tap dancers, we have better timing on the wood than off the wood.
Yes.
But,
Well,
but
somebody just recently asked me, they said, well, you started the show on time, even if you weren't ready. And so my response was, no, we were always ready. And that's why we
hey,
started on time. So
yeah, no, that's a great distinction, a super great distinction. So before we get out of here, before we started this interview, we had our little, mic check and all of that, and
mhm.
you mentioned my shirt. You
Yes.
noticed my shirt,
Yes.
so I just want to say at the end, a little shameless plug. I'm gonna put in the comment section a link to, if anybody would like to support us by purchasing any of our shirts or merchandise. We have mugs and things like that. Most of what we do through this production company of mine is all free work. Whether it's on YouTube or we've hosted a lot of footage events that are just free for anybody who'd like to join us. So, you can support us for free by liking and subscribing, but you can also support us financially if you would like to by purchasing a shirt. And this one here has Tommy Sutton featured on it. This is our Chicago Shuffle shirt. So up top we have people who are no longer with us, and then on the bottom we have folks who are still here with us now. I'm going to do an updated version because we couldn't fit everyone on a t-shirt, worth mentioning, but we had to have people like Sammy Dyer and of course Tommy Sutton on there. So, for anyone interested, the link is in the chat. And I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who's tuned in and joined us live. And thank you, Miss Peggy Sutton, for joining us. We really appreciate all that you've shared with us as we're kind of closing out Women's History Month. So I'm glad we got to highlight some of your history along with his as well today.
Well, thank you for having me. And thank you for, your interest in tap and in the history of tap and kind of keeping it alive and, putting everything together. It's appreciated.
For sure. No, I appreciate that right back. Yeah. We can't wait for folks to do it for us. So I'm glad that we're all doing our part to keep our all these legacies alive. So yeah, thank you again, and again thanks to all who tuned in. We'll catch you next time on the Real Talk Tap Talks.